In June of 2008, a helicopter touched down at the most famous cricket ground in the world. A tall Texan stepped out carrying a clear plexiglass box. Inside it, $20 million in cash. He wanted the world to see it. What the world didn't know was that the money wasn't really his, and neither was the fortune behind it. Because this man was running the second largest Ponzi scheme in American history. $7 billion, around 30,000 victims in more than 100 countries. An empire supposedly worth $50 billion, controlled in reality by just two men. And almost nobody remembers his name. Here's why you've never heard of him. In December of 2008, the biggest fraud in history detonated across every front page. Bernie Madoff, tens of billions of dollars, the face of the financial crisis. Just 2 months later, a second scheme collapsed, smaller than Madoff's, but still one of the largest ever uncovered. The press barely blinked. The world had only enough outrage for one villain that year. Some even argue that missing Madoff for years is exactly why regulators finally moved so hard on this second man. He was the makeup call. His name was Robert Allen Stanford, and unlike Madoff, he didn't hide in the shadows. He got himself knighted. Stanford's beginnings were nothing like the image he'd later sell. A Texan born in 1950, he went to Baylor University, where he met the man who would become his lifelong partner in crime, a roommate named James Davis. His first real business was a gym. It failed. He turned to speculating on real estate in Houston in the 1980s, and there he finally made money. But real estate wasn't the dream. The dream was something bigger, offshore, and far away from the people who ask hard questions. So he set up a bank on the tiny island of Montserrat and called it Guardian International Bank. When regulators there started to circle, he simply moved the whole operation to the neighboring island of Antigua and rebranded it with a name that sounded like century-old money: Stanford International Bank. Same man, new island, fewer questions. His weapon of choice was the most boring product in all of finance: a certificate of deposit. Not risky stocks, not exotic derivatives, just park your money, earn interest, sleep easy, the kind of thing your grandparents would buy. He aimed it first at wealthy Latin Americans nervous about the stability of their own governments. To them, a dollar bank on a calm Caribbean island sounded like a fortress. Within 3 years, the bank's assets rocketed to around $350 million. Then he pushed into the United States, opened a headquarters in Houston, and the money truly began to flood in. And here was the tell. Stanford's certificates didn't just pay a little more than everyone else. They paid more, consistently, in good years and bad. In 2008, while the S&P 500 was collapsing by nearly 40%, Stanford's bank claimed its portfolio had lost barely more than 1%. Regulators would later call returns like that improbable, bordering on impossible. That is the oldest tell in finance. When something is safe and pays well above the market and somehow never has a bad year, it isn't an investment, it's bait. But investors didn't see bait, they saw a knight. Stanford understood the thing most fraudsters never do. People don't invest in numbers. They invest in a story and in a man who looks impossible to doubt. So he manufactured the man. He poured money into Antigua, banks, tourism, a newspaper, restaurants, an entire landscaped enclave locals called Stanfordville, complete with an observation tower that school children visited on field trips. In 2006, the island made him a knight. From then on, he was Sir Alan, an American with a British-style title, hosting busloads of retirees for catered lunches at his Houston office. Who interrogates a knight? Then came cricket, a $100 million deal with English cricket, a winner-take-all match. And that helicopter, and that box of $20 million in cash. By 2008, he sat on the Forbes 400, personally worth an estimated $2.2 billion. His company is claiming to manage around $50 billion. The spending was almost cartoonish. In one 3-year stretch, he blew roughly $100 million on aircraft alone. He once spent $12 million just to lengthen his yacht by 6 feet. It looked like an empire. It was a stage set, and behind the curtain, it was run by only 2 people. Think about that. A supposed $50 billion financial empire, and almost the entire truth of it lived inside 2 heads. Sir Alan and his old college roommate, James Davis, who ran the numbers out of an office in Memphis, far from Houston, far from scrutiny. Davis would later confess that from practically his first day as chief financial officer in the late 1980s, the job was simple: make up numbers and cook the books. And he kept doing it for 2 decades. Underneath the knighthood and the cricket, the mechanic was the same trick Charles Ponzi ran a century earlier. There were no magic investments. When an old investor wanted their money back, Stanford paid them with a new investor's deposit. As long as fresh money poured in faster than it flowed out, the illusion survived, and a fortune simply vanished into Stanford's own pockets. Prosecutors later traced more than $1.5 billion funneled into secret personal loans to himself. To keep the watchdogs blind, he bought them. Money moved through a slush fund in Switzerland to bribe the bank's own auditor and Antigua's top banking regulator. According to Davis, he and that regulator sealed their corrupt arrangement in the most chilling way imaginable. They became blood brothers, cutting their fingers and mixing their blood. The regulators weren't watching the bank. They were part of it. And when the numbers still wouldn't add up, Stanford just invented better ones. In 2008, he claimed to have personally injected over $700 million of his own money to shore up the bank. To make the books support that lie, his accountants took a piece of real estate the bank had bought for about $63 million and, with no appraisal and no improvements, revalued it on paper at more than $3 billion. A 5,000% overnight markup on nothing. Here's the part that should make you angry. This was not a perfect crime that fooled everyone. The warnings were there for over a decade, and they were ignored. Investors would later allege that as far back as 1997, US regulators had already concluded on multiple occasions that Stanford's operation looked exactly like a Ponzi scheme. And still, for years, essentially nothing happened. A later internal report found the agency had simply failed to uncover or act on what was in front of it. Even inside the company, people sensed it. Some employees loved the freedom and the money. Others described feeling trapped, as if they were living in a corporate thriller, watching something they couldn't quite prove and didn't dare name. The returns were improbable. The whole thing ran through two men. Nobody could really explain how the money was made, but the money was flowing. And when money is flowing, human nature finds a way to not ask the question. It took the 2008 financial crisis, and finally, whistleblowers handing over hard proof to force the reckoning. When the crisis hit, investors everywhere wanted their cash back at once. Redemptions spiked, new deposits dried up, and a Ponzi scheme is a shark. The moment it stops swimming forward, it dies. Stanford tried to plug the hole with a lie. He stood in front of nervous employees and told them the bank was sitting on $5 billion in spare cash. At that very moment, his own finance chief was texting him the real figure. The bank had roughly $173 million left, against the more than $8 billion it owed its depositors. In February of 2009, US regulators moved in and froze everything. Stanford, sensing the end, tried to flee the country on a private jet and was turned away because he tried to pay with a credit card, and the charter company would only take a wire transfer. The knight couldn't scrape together the cash for his own escape, and it was his own world that gave him up. One of the private pilots who had flown Stanford's planes tipped off a relative in law enforcement, pointing them to a girlfriend's family home in rural Virginia. That's exactly where agents found him, waiting almost for someone to come. The unraveling was total. Antigua stripped him of his knighthood. Sir Alan was gone. Before his trial even began, he was beaten so badly by another inmate that he was hospitalized. His lawyers argued that an addiction to anti-anxiety medication had left him unfit to even stand trial. Defiant to the end, Stanford filed a counterclaim demanding over $7 billion in damages from the very government agencies investigating him. Then his oldest ally turned. James Davis, the college roommate, the man who'd cooked the books for 20 years, cut a deal and testified against him. In 2012, a jury convicted Stanford on 13 of 14 counts. Prosecutors asked for 230 years. The judge handed down 110. He is serving it today in a high-security federal penitentiary in Florida. And every appeal has failed. The people who paid the real price were never Stanford. It was the roughly 30,000 ordinary investors across more than 100 countries, teachers, retirees, families, who handed over their life savings because a knight told them it was safe. For years, many of them recovered nothing at all. Recovery has crawled on for well over a decade, clawing back only a fraction, mostly through settlements with the big banks that move Stanford's money, including one over $1 billion, more than 14 years after the collapse. And some victims say legal and administrative costs swallowed much of even that. Madoff got the movies, the documentaries, the household name infamy. Stanford, bigger in victims, longer in years, stranger in story, got forgotten. Here's what should stay with you. Stanford's victims weren't reckless gamblers. They were careful. They chose the boring product, the safe one. They were fooled not by greed, but by trust. A title, a stadium, an auditor's stamp, a regulator's silence, a man who looked far too respectable to be a thief. The most dangerous fraud never looks like a gamble. It looks like the safest choice in the room. If a knight with a private island and a regulator in his pocket could keep it running for 20 years, the real skill isn't spotting the obvious scams. It's actually knowing what your money is doing. There's a link in the description to a tool I use to keep track of exactly where every dollar sits. Take a look. And if you want more forgotten billion-dollar frauds like this, subscribe. The next one is even harder to believe.